Hello, I'm Michelle Terpster from Toolfarm, and welcome to Advanced Audio Repair for Video Editors with iZotope RX8. Today we're covering repairing problems with audio, such as lavalier mic rustle, unwanted reverb and dialogue, noise in the background, such as air conditioners and fans, and more. We will have a Q&A later in the show with Dominic Delore, who is the social care specialist with iZotope. If you ever ask questions on iZotope's social media, he will likely be the person answering your questions. So if you do have questions today, you can leave them in the chat on YouTube. So before I introduce our presenter, David Barber, I want to tell you a little bit about Toolfarm. Toolfarm is a value-added reseller of audio and video editing software, 3D tools, visual effects tools and plugins, and much more. We are your one-stop shop for all your media creation needs. And if you have questions about anything, just go to our website and ask. We have a chat in the corner. This webinar today features iZotope RX8, and we do have an awesome sale right now happening through May 4th. The details are here. You can go to toolfarm.com for details about the sale. In addition, if you are registered for this webinar, you'll receive an exclusive discount code. If you haven't registered yet, there's a link right there, a bit.ly code, but you can also get the link in the description on YouTube. So today's webinar, we're featuring David Barber, and he's a supervising sound editor and recording mixer. He began his career in the music industry and has been working in audio, working with audio for television and film for close to 2 decades. He's the 3-time winner of the MPSE Golden Reel Award for In Search of Fellini. Currently, he's working on the Netflix series Special, Season 2, and one of my personal favorites, Pen 15, on Hulu. His feature film credits include After, Escape Plan Extractor, and the soon-to-be-released Sundance hit, The Killing of Two Lovers. He currently sits on the board of directors at the Motion Picture Sound Editors. And I should also mention that at the end of the presentation, David will be giving away a copy or a license of iZotope RX8 Standard. And you'll just have to answer a trivia question, so pay close attention during his presentation for a chance to win. So thank you for coming, David. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody, and big thank you to Michelle and Alicia from Toolfarm for having me, and to Brian, Dominic, and the whole iZotope family for extending me the opportunity to come and speak to y'all here. RX8 Advanced is simply a superhero in the post world. As a supervising sound editor and a re-recording mixer, I have it open on every project every day. As a matter of fact, my second screen usually looks something like this. It is so versatile that I find myself creating uses for it on the spot, even on the mix stage. I did a pretty long-winded demo for iZotope on some techniques I utilized on a film called The Killing of Two Lovers, which is set for release May 14th, so be on the lookout for that. I'm not sure what everyone's familiarity is and experience with iZotope's RX, so I'll do a brief overview of the software and then dive into some specific examples in a little bit. But first I have a little anecdote about how we used RX8 Advanced to really save our bacon on a production that just started right after the COVID lockdown had lifted in June 2020. As you know, RX8 is the premier denoising audio software on the market today, and it's nearly ubiquitous in my field of audio post, and it's also becoming more popular amongst video editors as well that I work with. And the recent global circumstances have completely upended your standard workflows, and as a result, you're getting more and more kind of odd audio from strange places. We've received a lot of ADR, had to shoot ADR in people's homes, on their computers, in their closets, all remotely. And then sets, of course, have their own set of problems, and the COVID protocols have affected that a lot as well. So this first show, they'd come back, and everybody was excited to be back on set, but everybody was very diligent about the COVID protocols because nobody wanted to get shut down because they wanted their jobs back. And they didn't want it to also have a ripple effect through the industry. It's like, oh, that place got shut down, and so on and so forth. So they were being hypersensitive to the, and rightly so, to the COVID protocols. But a mistake was made in thinking that they needed to leave the air conditioning and ventilation system on constantly during shooting. It had to be on 24/7, and that wasn't the case, but it happened anyway. And the first 4 days of the shoot all took place with the ventilation system on. So I get a call from set after that had all gone down with great concern about the audio. And I said, well, you just got to send me some clips. So they did. So it was really awful. It sounded like each actor was standing next to a gigantic box fan. There was just a going behind every lav, there was just no way to get around it. And so I dove into RX8 Advanced and started playing with the different modules and tried to come up with a formula that could suppress it enough that it would actually be passable at the end, because there were a lot of intimate, low-level talking moments too that you just don't want to try to recreate in ADR. So I ended up with something that I thought was good. And then I also, during editorial, they were posed with a new problem, because as you all, if you're an editor, as you know, you have to provide rough cuts to, in this case, they had to provide it to the network and to other producers to say, how's this cut of the show going? And you want them to be concentrating on the story, on the acting, on the flow, and not all of a sudden have a giant box fan sit there and barely be able to hear the dialogue and have them completely taken out of it. So the editors reached out, what can we do about this? And I encouraged them to get a copy of RX8, which they did. And it, to their benefit, I just sent over the presets that I had come up with, and they used RX8 Advanced in the editorial suite so that what they presented to the networks would get passed. And it ended up going through, and the network was none the wiser that all of the interiors had this horrendous sound going on. So that's a situation where the video editors, the film editors, were just blown away by what RX could do. And then they unfortunately had to undo what they did and then give it back to me so that I could do it in a more fine-tuned way. But it really saved everyone, from the mistake that was made on set to how it was presented to the network to how it finally got to me. RX8 touched every aspect of that show. So I wanted to go through some of those situations, just the general anomalies that we come across in production audio, and things that you can do to give it a heavy hand and just get the noise into the background. And then I'll also show you some of the tuning techniques that I would use in the, when you're fine processing it for the final mix. So let's dig in. Okay, so this is the R8 Advanced interface. This is the standalone version. You can also use it with a digital audio, a DAW, like Pro Tools, where you can send audio out of Pro Tools into RX8, or you can just open RX8 here, process the files, and then import them into the other programs that you're using. So the main window here, this is where you're going to see your spectrogram when you import audio. And the spectrogram is a visual representation of the audio. So let's go ahead and do that. You can do it a couple of ways. You can do it by importing, or like open file, or you can simply drag and drop something. And so this is an audio file from a film I did a while back that is actually coming out on Mother's Day, called Paper Spiders. But it has a girl walking on some gravel, which is a lot of this crunchy stuff here. And you can see down here we have generator noise and some other elements going on, kind of a metallic ring that I think also came from the generator. But generally some problematic stuff. But this, I'm going to keep going through the what the software looks like first and what the various functions are, and then we'll dig into this particular clip. So here's your spectrogram. Up here is kind of a world window of the clip that you're looking at. You can see if I highlight a small area, it highlights it up here. and so on. And then if you go over to right, here's where all the muscle of RX is. These are all the modules that you can use to process the audio. So they have them very strategically named for what they're meant to do. Ambience match, breath control, de-bleed, de-click, that's obvious, de-crackle, that's obvious, de-S. And so one thing that you really want to do is go through and kind of see what each module can do, because not those modules don't actually only do those things, and a lot of the times those items can be treated differently, if not better, by a different module that does something similar, but you use it in a different way. So I'll kind of go into that a little bit as well. Down here in the lower left, you can affect the opacity of what you're looking at. You can have your waveform overlaid. You can have it overlay the spectrogram, or you can just look completely at the spectrogram. I usually like to leave it here because that to me is just a visual impedance at some of the things that I'm trying to look at, but it's a great way to know where you are in your audio file if you don't know it well enough to see what it's doing here. This field, we are dealing with time from left to right, and then we're dealing with frequency from bottom to top. So 20 hertz, very low, up to 20 kilohertz, very high. And then the intensity of the colors in the spectrogram are going to show you what is kind of a hot spot, or what is loud. So the softer images are, or the, let's see, the darker images are softer, and then the brighter ones are much louder. And this is important because as you get to know the human voice, animal sounds, rings, hums, traffic, you can really just look at this image and see where your problems are without even listening to it, which is a very cool thing. And pretty soon you'll find yourself starting to process without even listening to the audio. But silly me, sound man, always listen to the audio. I'm just saying that this kind of, once you get used to what you're seeing a lot, you can strategize how you're going to attack something just by looking at it. You can zoom in vertically, you can zoom in horizontally. There are also key controls for that. There's also some clickable zooms here. Zoom in, zoom out, zoom to selection, and then zoom all the way back out. A grabber tool. Instant process, I'll address that in a little bit, but that is a fantastic speed time-saving tool. And these are your selector tools over here. So here is a time-based tool where you can select things over time from top to bottom. And here is a frequency-based tool where you can select frequencies from left to right that cover your entire clip. And then the box tool, you can draw around anything. The lasso tool and the paintbrush tool. Lasso tool, you can kind of draw your own creations. And the paintbrush, you can make selections like you're painting. There are also harmonics, a smart tool. Down here is a very important window for me. It's the cursor window. And what that does is that shows you anywhere you are on the spectrogram. You can see that cursor in the bottom right. So look down here as I'm moving around. It's telling you what frequency you're sitting on. And I will show you something fun with that in just a second. And then your history. As you go through various processes, you'll see what you've done and how you got to where you are. So, and if you want to step back or go back and check what the original file sounded like versus the one that you processed, you can see, you can just click around in here through the history. So let's take a listen to this audio clip.
Mom? Mom!
Okay, so straight away you've got this generator hum that you know you're not going to want in there. And there is a great tool called Dialog Isolate, and this is one that I like to use it very surgically, but you can also use it globally and in a very aggressive manner. So if you're in the video world and you have to get something out to somebody and you've got a big noisy section, you can just take this whole area. Dialog Isolate, the reason it's called Dialog Isolate is because it's a machine learned module. It has been trained with thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of human dialogue so that it knows, hey, this is human speech, this is not human speech. So it's a very smart denoising tool. And if you went through and just say, okay, I want to turn down the noise and leave the dialogue up, you can see that a lot of your problems go away in a hurry.
Mom? Mom!
So on this particular piece of dialogue, even being that aggressive, it is not that destructive to the dialogue itself. And that is something that I always try to keep in mind whenever I'm processing something, is I try to do the minimum amount of processing necessary to achieve the goal. So it's not about going in and smashing everything into the background, because you are affecting voices, breaths. You can hear the footsteps now sound a little watery. They're not as articulate. Not that you don't want to go in and take those out as well. But the point is that when you process something heavily, you are that's something that people key into, and you will get called out on it a lot, especially in the audio portion. In the audio world, over-processed audio is a big no-no. So it's why I try to peel things off just in the thinnest of layers until you get down to the to something that's going to work for the scene. And it's always situationally based. If it's an intimate scene and it has to be quiet, or if you have a lot of ambient noise that is going to be put in, say there's a cityscape, then you can get away with a little more noise. So that's a pretty aggressive way to do it. And if you wanted to go even further, you can just hit it again if for some reason that generator down at the bottom was still bothering you.
Mom? Mom!
So that is actually a pretty good result for this audio file. So that's your aggressive quick fix if you were trying to output a cut for people to watch and you just wanted to try to get this noise out of there. That's a great way to aggressively go about it. If you want to dig in deeper, the process that I would go through, and I would try to get out the hum first. One of the things when you're thinking about structures of denoising and structures of getting rid of the anomalies, I try to attack things individually first, and things that are probably the worst of the anomalies for me in this one. The two bad things are the hum, that ring, and then the crunchy footsteps. So before I do any broadband denoising on this file, I would try to get rid of the hum, and then I would also try to get rid of those crunchy footsteps. So you go over here and you have a module called dehum. And it is a fantastic tool that can be used in the same way as Dialog Isolate. You can use it in a very heavy-handed manner, or you could use it in a very surgical manner. It has a great button up here for learning, where it will detect the strongest hum. It'll establish that as the root note, and then it'll mathematically build harmonics on top of it. And down here you can select how many harmonics you have it go after, how many you have it remove. So for a very broad dehum, I just went learn. It has 30 hertz as the frequency, the base frequency. And then the filter cue, that is basically you're affecting the width of these reductions. So high Q like that, you can see the reductions are very thin. The low Q, the reductions are a little fatter. And when I say fatter, I mean that it is actually pulling out neighboring frequencies as well. So depending on how surgical you want to be, you can adjust the Q. So let's take a look at taking out 30 hertz with all 16 harmonics. And you can see it takes away your hum. Here, I'll A-B it while it's playing. So you can hear what a good job it does of getting that hum out of your way. Now, the counter to that is that those hums go right through some of these vocal frequencies. So let's zoom in on this one, and you can visually see that it does some destructive things to the low end of her voice. So here it is dehummed.
Hum.
And you can kind of hear a little warble on the low end as opposed to
Hum.
So that is undesired. You don't want to do that to the voice. So a couple things you can do. You can back off the number of frequencies, the number of harmonics you use. And the other option, and this is one of the surgical options that I was mentioning earlier, and this is where our little cursor window comes in handy. I use this technique a lot because it is very precise. But I'll just drop the cursor on the frequency here, and you can see in the lower right, I'm sitting on about 60 hertz. So I type in 60. I've found that if you match the filter cue to the frequency in this dehum module and process, it's very precise on what it takes out. And I think you can visually see that really well represented, that I'm not killing a bunch of neighboring frequencies. I really just took 60 hertz and took it out of the picture. And then in the situation up here where you're coming into some vocal ranges, I think we're at about 360 here. So if I did 360 and 360, you can also process just within your selection. So I can go right up to the voice, I can go right after the voice, right up to the voice, right after the voice. And you can do that with each one of these frequencies. And if you say, yeah, do you really take the time to do that? Yeah, I kind of do. Because it's simply just the most precise way to go about denoising and getting rid of the hum without affecting the voice adversely. So let's go over to our crunchy footsteps. And declick is a great tool for this. Single band defaults. Let's take a look at what that does for you. So you'll notice here, sorry, let me slow down a little bit here. I'll make a selection, and then these are the parameters that the module is going to put on that selection, and then you render or process it over here. So you can see what it's taken out in this area. There are different algorithms that you can use, and one of my favorites is the multiband periodic clicks, because it tends to take a bigger, it tends to acknowledge these bigger clicks. So you can get in around these. and process, and it starts to take away some of the harsher, more articulate transient clicks. And then the ultimate cleanup tool is one called spectral repair. And I'll zoom in on this a little bit so you can see how this works. And then I'm going to introduce you to instant process. So spectral repair, I'll draw a little box here. You can see here that the wings here are clear, and then the gray is your selection, and then the wing is clear. So what this module does is it takes information from this clear spot and this clear spot, and then it interpolates what it should be in the middle, removing these items. And you can affect the strength of that. You can affect the width. You can see the wings are getting bigger and smaller here. And then using the number of bands, you can very much tighten it up or make it broader. So if we go to the default settings, and horizontal, you're going to be it'll be interpolating from the left and right of the selection. Vertical, north and south of the selection, and 2D, it kind of gets an all-around picture. So since we have vertical transients here with the footsteps, I will set it to a tight hue. I'm going to really narrow the width. I'm going to do our time-based selector, so you can see what a thin margin on either side it's choosing from to fill out. And it's somewhat of a this is kind of a removal setting, because I had it select from a very silent area on the right, very silent area on the left, and it just says, oh, okay, if it's silent there and there, this is what should be in between there. So now enter instant process. What instant process does is, if you have it on attenuate, it's thinking of the spectral repair module. So whatever these settings are up here, as soon as you make your selection and lift your finger off the mouse, it executes it. So for this, now with instant process on, you just move through this and just start taking things out at super speed. You don't have to go over here and hit render, over here, render, over here, render. You just kind of move all the way through it. And then you go to box tool and you just start to really clean stuff up, and I'm being pretty guerrilla, but you can see the speed with which you can move when you have instant process on. I would warn you to be careful, because you'll start going on and you'll say, okay, I'm going to go over here to dehum now, and then you'll make a selection. It's still going to instant process the attenuate because you haven't unchecked this. So don't worry, that happens all the time. So that kind of gets us through here. The spectral repair, again, this is a tool I would use for the next anomaly that we have, which is this kind of metallic ringing. And you can see it's linear, it's time-based, and it pretty much stays the same frequency. It may oscillate a little up and down as it rattles. But let's just take a look. We're going to turn off instant process so it doesn't do anything we don't want it to. But if I just make the smallest of selections here, the before and after weighting, I can have it favor sound above or favor the selection below. I usually favor above in these situations, mainly because the lower you go, generally you're getting noisier as you go lower in frequency. So I just always like to cheat it a little bit towards the higher frequency, which is going to be softer, so it'll more likely remove what we're looking at. So we'll put it on instant process again, and it goes away. And that goes away. So there, and so let's just do a little global. You can also dialog isolate certain areas. So you can always make a selection and have it only apply to that selection. So if we take that down 7 dB, you can see it kind of balances out with the rest of the audio in the clip. And then you can do another version.
Mom? Mom!
So you can hear we've reduced the ring, the chirp, the hum, the background ambience noises, and obviously I didn't go in and clean up fully the footsteps, but those could also be cleaned out as well. So that is a lot of those are most of the things that you're going to hear from production sound that you have to handle. Background noise, ambient noise, hums and whines and things like that. So let me move on to a different piece of audio here. Let's look at something that needs some de-reverbing. Because I'm sure in editorial suites you'll get that a lot. It's like, it sounds really echoey. Are we going to be able to get rid of that? And a lot of de-reverb modules do, they get a little watery. Reverb's a tricky thing. And one of the things that I found that it, again, like the other modules, is you try to use each one to its strength and also as little as you need to. So here's a piece of audio with some verb on it. Okay, so you can hear it's a pretty echoey environment. And a lot of the sets that we come across are built within warehouses. And they'll have open roofs, so they're supposed to be in a home interior. And then if the couple or whoever starts yelling and getting into a fight, since there's no roof on the environment, the sound spills out and it echoes around the entire warehouse or the entire set. So there is a dialogue de-reverb module that I think is very good because it's much, it's concentrated on dialogue and not just general reverbs. So you can affect the amount that you reduce, the sensitivity of it, ambience preservation, which is how much of the background noise you want to keep. So let's just do a big reduction here. And you can hear straight away that it cleaned up a whole lot of that decay. And visually, it's really fun that you notice that the decay happens over time, and you can literally see what happens is it doesn't grab the whole voice, but it grabs certain frequencies, and those frequencies extend out. So to get some of those extensions, I'll go back to spectral repair here and use the vertical interpolation. Turn on my instant process attenuate, and I always start at the top if I'm going to do this because I'm favoring, I want you to be looking at the higher frequencies for the what you're going to be putting in the space. If I started at the bottom, you see all the noise is above it, so it would keep putting noise in, or it would think it wouldn't be as precise. But if I start at the top where there's less noise and just start going down the ladder, so to speak, you can see that it's more clearly getting rid of that decay. So if you go down all of these, you're going to end up with a pretty dry signal. So that's gone from So those are a couple of techniques that I like to use when you go into when you're dealing with a very echoey environment. Single bursts of voices are obviously easier because they say their piece and then the echo just kind of drifts off and you have a chance to remove that echo. When people are arguing or speeches go on for a longer period of time, the echo builds up on itself and it builds up within the voices, and that's much different and much more difficult to get rid of. Still can be done, and it still can be at least mitigated to a point where you know, it's usable audio. Because these are questions that come up. Am I going to have to ADR that? So a lot of the times people don't think you can get rid of the reverb as well as you can. So let's see. I know we're going to go to a Q&A here in a second. Somebody mentioned something about inverting the audio, and I want to show you something that's kind of fun that you can do in some modules and can't in others. So here's just a background piece with some birds in it. So I'll show you something that's really fun with this. First off, for the people that get the complaint, gosh, I hate those birds, or there's this repeated bird, but I love the take. How can I get rid of that bird? You can use the lasso tool and go in and be very precise about selecting the vocalization of this bird. And pardon me while I'm being very precise here. All right, I'll get a little sloppier to speed up. So the little play arrow with the dots around it will play only your selection. So here's the bird isolated. All right, so there's our happy little bird. Down here in these other modules, there is a slot called Find Similar. And so what this is going to do is you're going to find everything that's similar to your selection. So I don't like that bird. It just found all of your birds. Now you just go into a spectral repair, maybe do a tight left-right direction of interpolation, render it. And you've gotten rid of probably 95% of the bird, and you can just jump around and clean up now. But I'm going to undo that, and if you go up into the edit window, invert selection. So everything now that's contained within the selection, you're going to invert it, so it's going to select everything outside of that. So now, if I Command X, I've just deleted everything outside of my selection, and I've created a brilliant sound effect track of only our bird. So that is a really, those things, I used Find Similar a lot. A lot of the times if I'm cutting ambiances or sound effects and you have to loop them because you've got a great 30 or 45 seconds of church ambience, but there was a door close in the middle of it, and you loop it because it's a 4-minute scene, and then you've got this door close looped 4 times. So then you just go into that ambience track. I would isolate around one of the doors, hit Find Similar, it'll find all the doors, and then I'll remove them. So it's a great tool. And then being able to invert, I will do things where I'll isolate cricket tracks and invert everything outside of it. And then if you know when you're cutting ambiances or you're building backgrounds, for a scene, you want individual control on the individual elements, because if you put in something that has traffic, air, wind, birds, crickets, and a plane, and then the person says, yeah, I hate the plane, it's really hard to get it out. So it's better to have stacked individual air and so on, so on, so forth. So this is a fun way to create, like this is just a perfect little chirpy bird track now that doesn't have all of the ambiences that went with it before. So yeah, those are kind of some of the basics that you can get into. I wanted to make sure that I hit things that editors get a lot of questions about, and that mostly hum, background ambiences, chirps, crackles, and reverbs. But there's a whole lot else that the program does. And like I said, it's very surgical, but also can be very heavy-handed for quick solutions. So open to taking questions. Let's see here. Okay, I've really been looking for a chain or method to clean up audio people do on Zoom streaming recording skills online. Do you have any tips for removing gargle? Oi, okay, that is a tough one, but let me, here was a live stream, and hang on to your ears, it's going to be a little brittle, but I think this kind of is going to speak to that.
Exactly. I've tried a lot of different render engines.
Okay, so just looking at the audio right here, I can see straight up, and you can hear how brittle it is, and this is a lot that happens with streaming and computer audio. There's not a straight de-garble, but there are a lot of things that you can do when you understand the voice to help clarify and to make it more listenable. A lot of the denoising and processing that we do in dialogue editing and dialogue mixing is simply that. It's, you want to be able to turn it up to a theatrical level, but have the voice still be comfortable. Clearly, with this recording, if we turn this up anymore, you know, we'd all be squinting our eyes like we just sucked on a lemon, because there's a lot of harshness to it. And the spectrogram is great for that, because you can go zero straight in and see this is a really hot spot. So if we zoom in on that, and it's uniform. So this is a result of the environment, the microphone, placement, the speaker's voice, because you see that this is all the way across. So one of the other things that, with all of this fancy stuff that RX8 has in it, one of the brilliant things is that it kept the basics together. So you have EQ. So what I'll do, because you can visually see, like, this is clearly my hottest spot, like right here. And if I put the cursor there and I look down in the bottom right to the cursor window, you can see it's about 3870 hertz. So we'll just take band 3 here, put it at 3870. Here you'll really get to see what the Q does, because if I do a wide Q, so now you're actually going to be affecting frequencies from here. It's going to be about 1.5K up to 10, so maybe that's a little too wide. But I would just go ahead in with an EQ, and you can see that that softened that part quite a bit. And you have a very similar thing down here, where the bottom frequencies, the low mids, are really hot as well. So I would do the same thing, where you just kind of go into this area around 300 hertz, and you're going to want to go about 200 hertz either side of that. With your Q. So you flare it out here so you can see that it'll be affecting to about 500 and then down to about 180 or so. So if you just go in and look at it and then apply some EQ.
I've tried a lot of different render engines. I started out with Cinema's.
You quickly get a much more listenable product. So let's go back. I'll just A/B it here.
I've tried a lot of different render engines. I started out with Cinema's own default standard render.
I mean, and those are some pretty aggressive settings. You'd want to play around with it to be a little more precise. But yeah, don't forget things like EQ, gain, phase, things that are down there. If you really want to get into like pieces of dialogue, you can see that there's a lot of resonance and a lot of harsh resonance in that area. So you could also go to attenuate, get back to spectral repair, select north and south, tighten up your direction of interpolation a little bit, and really just start to get that hot stuff.
But it was great fun, and
because here it is before.
But it was great fun, and
so.
But it was.
That's a couple of ways that I would attack a piece of audio like this, just to start to get it into the playable world. You can also see that these high harmonics, those are more like digital artifacts than they are actual harmonics of the voice. So you could also put a high pass in there. A lot of your cinema audio and TV audio is rolled off at about, 9,500 or 10K. So you're really not hearing a lot of that stuff.
That was back when it was V-Ray 1.9. It was way more complicated than it.
So that's infinitely more listenable. I hope that answered the question. Aha, remove music from an old archival. Okay, this is, this can be tricky, but it is doable. I'm going to show you a module called Music Rebalance. And what I would do is, again, everything, it's difficult, everything is content specific. So what works in one environment might not work in the next. But here I've just brought in a piece of music. As if this one be Joe. So if you want to pretend that this is happening in the background of one of your archival pieces, you can get in there with Music Rebalance. And this tool here allows you some individual control on the different elements. So I'm going to process this a couple of different ways in a hurry here. So here I'm going to remove the singing. So I'm going to take the vocal all the way out. And this is another one of your machine learned modules where it's been trained to go, okay, that's a vocal, that's a bass, that's percussion, those are the harmonic instruments. So it's going in. It's going in, figuring out what those are, and then setting them to the levels that you want to. Here, I'll tell you a little mixing trick that I do for this. As soon as it finishes up here. So in this segment here, I remove the vocals. You can see I move the vocal slider down. I'm just going to do a couple in a row here. Here I am going to leave the vocal but remove the bass. I'll remove everything else. One of the very cool ways that I like to use this is if I'm mixing a piece and they have some background music and the vocals are a little hot in the background music, and it's interrupting the dialogue, it's you hate to always be pulling down the music to clear for the dialogue, because a lot of the time the energy of the music, you want to keep it up in the background. But until I got to music rebalance, I was always having to finesse that and maybe give some more low end to keep the energy up, but reduce the high end to get the high mids to get the vocals out of the way. Now I can just drop it into here, and I can literally take the same piece of music where all the other elements except for the vocals stay in the same spot, and I'll drop the vocal 5 dB when people are talking, and then it'll pop back up, and it's really smooth and innocuous. It just kind of rolls straight through. So let me do one more segment here where it just removes the bass and we'll just make it a drum and vocal section. So I'm showing you this because the archival footage you're talking about, this module does a pretty good job of recognizing speech and vocal and leaving it. So if you went in and toyed around with the other slider or the bass slider or the percussion, which is going to get some of the transients, you know, you might be able to utilize it to extract some of that music. And then what doesn't get out, again, you can go in with spectral repair. And since music is over time, it's sound over time, you'll probably be using the north-south direction of interpolation to kind of dig out the little pieces in between the speech or what other elements you're wanting to stay. But so again, let's hear. We'll go song, no vocals, just kind of a karaoke track, vocals only, and then just drums and vocals. So you can hear what this module can do.
I answer life's big question as if it's soon to be sure. I really do believe that someday we're gonna have it all.
So you can see it intelligently pulled out the right things, and it did a pretty darn good job of it. So I would say if you have some music in the background, depending on what the elements of the music are, if they're sustained things, you pull down the other in the bass tab. If it's percussion stuff, you try to pull that down. Give that a go along with spectral repair. You might be able to get what you need. Couple more questions. How to warm a voice and improve clarity. That is going to, that is a trick. That is probably going to lean more in the world of EQ, which, again, the module that I showed you earlier in here. And it's really hard to say, because a lot of the times what's muddying it is not clear to me. Sometimes it's because of traffic noise muddied it up. Sometimes it's a buried lav. And each one of them is kind of going to require a different set of techniques. Yeah, DS and deplosive are handy. De-essing here, actually, I think I have a DS sample. There is a DS module that you can dig in, but I think my favorite, again, this is the wonderful part of the spectrogram, is my favorite aspect of it is being able to visually see.
One thing that I understand about Tim is, as a record producer, you make choices.
You can see where the harsh frequencies are. And again, the spectral repair does a great job if you go in and you do north-south interpolation and just get in on the hot parts. You don't want to make them lisp or anything, but you can.
The one thing that I understand
as opposed
One
to,
thing that I understand.
and it just takes just enough of that edge off. So yeah, I would say the EQ is going to be your friend, and then if it's something else environmental that's muddying things up, you'll want to dig into dialogue isolate or explore some of the other modules to kind of clean it up. Okay, I think we got time for one more question. Any good practices to clean up amateur recorded audio? We get self-made interviews, no external mic, right? Interviewees are in a quiet room, but we get reverb and not much clarity. Okay, the first thing I would do with, if I was given that situation and I'm just imagining it in my mind, the first thing I would do is I would go to the gain module and I would turn it up and just keep turning it up until you're getting the level of signal from the voices that you need. Because, and I do this in Pro Tools, if I'm given a dialogue edit or a mix, and they knew there was some shouting coming up in the scene, so the inputs were pretty low. Oftentimes I'll use clip gain to turn it up. In RX8, you can just turn the gain up yourself here. And so what that does, the first thing you want to do is get the dialogue to the level that you want it to be, and then start attacking the problems. So if you get it up to that level and then there's a really pronounced hum, now go in and de-hum it. If your background, the ambience that came up with the voice is now really thunderous, if there's a lot of rumble, you could roll it off with EQ. Dialogue isolate, as I showed you in that first clip, is very good and very harsh. I mean, I'm not harsh, but it can be very heavy-handed in reducing that background noise and identifying what the voice is and leaving it. There's another thing on dialogue isolate that I want to point out, is that you can actually, what it thinks is dialogue, you can turn up. So in the situation where you're a little distant, it's a camera microphone, you can go in, you can not only reduce the noise that it thinks is not dialogue, but what it does think is dialogue, you can turn up. You can give it a little extra kick there. I usually don't go higher than 2 or 3 dB, but it's been very handy. And you can even do it by frequency selection. Like you can go down here, or in this area here, you see it's the vocal frequencies get a little softer. So you go, you know what, I want to reduce noise in that area, but I want to turn up the voice. And you can see they got a little hotter. So that's another technique. And then probably attacking it with some of the de-reverbing stuff that I showed you earlier. But the most important thing is you got to get the dialogue up to a level that is playable, be it DVD or broadcast or whatnot. So as soon as you get up to that level, then you can start reducing the problems that you have with it as well. So, okay, so the trivia giveaway, it's going to be the fastest typer in the comments box. And the question is, I referenced a long-winded demo I did for iZotope. What was the movie and what is its release date?
It's a tough question, it sounds like.
It is. Let's see.
We have Mother's Day Spider, Fear of Rain, May 14.
Okay, May 14 is correct. Movie is not correct. It starts with the killing. And I think it's actually in my bio write-up on accident. There it is, Killing of Two Lovers.
All right, we're going to call it a winner.
Call it a winner. All right. Well, thank you all very much. And I hope this was informative and interesting. And please feel free to send any more questions if you have them.
Looks like everyone has the answer now.
Everybody's got it.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you, Dominic, for answering questions in the chat as well. This was really informative, and I learned a lot myself. I wanted to mention again that we do have a sale going on iZotope products. Check out toolfarm.com for the details. The sale ends on May 4th. So thank you again, David. This was great.
My pleasure. Thank you.